It's a real privilege for me to be with you, friends from West Michigan. Thank you for your efforts in the gospel movement there. I've been asked by Lisa to share a few thoughts on the role of race and faith and how we relate to one another across cultures. As I think about 2020 was a year of division. It was a year of political division, racial division, and in many contexts, even division within our families. When we read the New Testament, my understanding is that God has called those of us who are followers of Jesus to be part of a new society. And this new society is really committed to the unity of the church and all of its diversity across racial and denominational lines. The story in the New Testament that really epitomizes the power of transformation in this arena is really in the life of Saul, who became Paul. In Acts chapter 9, when we read the story about Saul, I believe that he was the most violent racist of the first century. He was capturing, imprisoning, and in many cases sentencing followers of Jesus to death. He stood by Stephen when Stephen was stoned, as described in Acts chapter 7, in the beginning of Acts chapter 8. In Acts chapter 9, something very profound happens. As Saul is on his way to Damascus to capture more followers of Jesus, he is confronted by Jesus with a blinding light, and he is knocked off his horse. And Jesus asks Saul a very profound question in chapter 9, verse 4. Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? And it's an interesting question because Jesus did not ask the question, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting the church? Jesus says it this way because to persecute the church was to persecute Jesus. Saul would understand that Jesus so identified with the church that to persecute the church was to persecute Jesus. And I believe that in this moment, Saul actually experienced three conversions. He experienced the conversion to Jesus. He experienced the conversion to the unity of the church because he understood how closely Jesus identified with his church. And then thirdly, as you read the rest of that chapter, he was converted to his calling to get to Rome to preach to Caesar. In Acts chapter 9, verse 17, we have the two most tender words of the New Testament. Ananias was sent to speak to Saul as he sat blind in the house on Straight Street in Damascus. And as he put his hand on the shoulder of Saul, he said these two simple words, Brother Saul. Brother Saul. Saul understood that he was now part of a family, and he would spend the rest of his life fostering a sense of family with everyone who began to follow Jesus, whether they were Jewish or Gentile. And when you read the letters of the New Testament and you read the missionary journeys, one of the ways that Saul fostered unity within the church was to raise money from Gentile Christians to support the effort of the Jewish church in Jerusalem. What we learn in this story is that we need to look at our racial differences not through the lens of power or politics, but through the lens of family. When we belong to Jesus, we have more in common with one another, even though we are racially different, than we have with our own family members when we have those who follow Jesus and those who do not. We are invited into this familial relationship with those that Jesus has called together. And in this environment that we are in, like Saul, we are challenged to do both the spiritual and the practical, to assist those communities that are in need as a manifestation of our commitment to the unity of the church. And I believe that in a West Michigan context, there are extraordinary opportunities to manifest this unity together.